All right, folks, coming up on Roland Unfiltered for Tuesday, March 26, 2019. What the hell happened in Chicago? Drama in the courtroom as all charges against Empire actor Jussie Smollett are dropped. Ooh, police superintendent and Chicago Mayor Emanuel, big man. Wait till we show you what they had to say, and also the explanation from the state's attorney's office as to why they dropped the charges. Trust me, everybody's confused. I don't think anybody's clear about what happened. We'll try to clear up some of this stuff for you. The FBI says it's not a hate crime when a white supremacist allegedly stabs and kills a black ROTC lieutenant for no reason at all, even though they found racial stuff that he posted online. Okay, that's a what the hell. New study shows hate crimes are up in counties where Donald Trump held campaign rallies. Who would have thunk it? The Trump administration is going to court to kill all of the Affordable Care Act. Yeah, all of it. But I thought he said he would not do something like that. The Supreme Court hears arguments today on the North Carolina gerrymandering case. They may make partisan and racial gerrymandering okay for the entire country. That could be dangerous. Senator Kamala Harris has a plan to raise teacher salaries and give even more help to teachers with minority students and to help HBCUs with teacher training. We'll tell you about that. Folks, it is a jam-packed show. It's time to bring the funk. I'm Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
Wild day in court in Chicago this morning. We got a notice, an emergency hearing. Jussie Smollett heads to court. About an hour later, all charges against Smollett dropped by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. There was a news conference after that took place involving Smollett and his attorney, Patricia Brown Holmes. This is what they had to say.
We have nothing to say to the police department except to investigate charges and not try their cases in the press, but to allow matters to be investigated, allow the state to investigate and to bring charges, and not to jump ahead and utilize the press to convict people before they are tried in a court of law. Jussie is, and as if you were in the courtroom, heard the prosecutors say, and we made sure that the prosecution knew. He is someone who has dedicated his life to public service since he was 15 years old. He has taken the city of Chicago as his home. He has volunteered in a variety of ways. He is a good, solid citizen of the city of Chicago. That was the comment made by the prosecutor today.
First of all, I want to thank my family, my friends, the incredible people of Chicago and all over the country and the world who have prayed for me, who have supported me, who have shown me so much love. No one will ever know how much that has meant to me, and I will forever be grateful. I want you to know that not for a moment was it in vain. I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one. I would not be my mother's son if I was capable of one drop of what I have been accused of. This has been an incredibly difficult time, honestly one of the worst of my entire life. But I am a man of faith, and I'm a man that has knowledge of my history, and I would not bring my family, our lives, or the movement through a fire like this. I just wouldn't. So I want to thank my legal counsel from the bottom of my heart, and I would also like to thank the state of Illinois for attempting to do what's right. Now I'd like nothing more than to just get back to work and move on with my life. But make no mistakes, I will always continue to fight for the justice, equality, and betterment of marginalized people everywhere. So again, thank you for all the support. Thank you for faith, and thank you to God. Bless y'all. Thank you very much.
None of that sat well with the superintendent for Chicago Police and Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. They held a news conference after that, angry and upset. Press play.
Do I think justice was served? No. Where do I think justice is? I think this city is still owed an apology. And let me digress for a moment. When I came on this job, I've been a cop now for about 31 years. When I came on this job, I came on with my honor, my integrity, and my reputation. If someone accused me of doing anything that would circumvent that, then I would want my day in court, period, to clear my name. I've heard that they wanted their day in court with TV cameras so America could know the truth, but no, they chose to hide behind secrecy and broker a deal to circumvent the judicial system. My job as a police officer is to investigate an incident, gather evidence, gather the facts, and present them to the state's attorney. That's what we did. I stand behind the detective's investigation.
And the ethical cost is you have, as a person who was in the House of Representatives when we tried to pass the Shepard legislation that dealt with hate crimes, putting them on the books, that President Obama then signed into law, to then use those very laws and the principles and values behind the Matthew Shepard hate crimes legislation to self-promote your career is a cost that comes to all the individuals, gay men and women who will come forward and one day say they were a victim of a hate crime who now will be doubted. People of faith, Muslim or any other religious faith, who will be a victim of hate crimes. People that of all walks of life and backgrounds, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Now this casts a shadow of whether they're telling the truth, and he did this all in the name of self-promotion.
All right, forgive me for even listening to Rahm Emanuel. This is the same man who for 13 months kept from the Chicago public the Laquan McDonald tape, the cop who shot and killed Laquan McDonald, who lied about what took place on that night, which we only know because the tape was forced to be released. That cop was convicted of second-degree murder. So really, Rahm Emanuel, when you set up and talk about this is a whitewash, when you did all you could to keep justice from being held in that case, you might want to just go sit down, wait for the runoff, and then for you to leave office. But that's just another story there. But again, to watch him whining on television was a bit too much. All right. So here's the deal. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office, the prosecutor who was involved in the case, so here's what happened. There was no plea bargain. But what he said was, Joseph Maggott, he said that Smollett agreed to do community service, also to forfeit the $10,000 bond that was paid. Again, here to hopefully make some sense of this, legal analyst Monique Presley. Monique, welcome back to Roland Unfiltered. So the district attorney said, so the DA, Monique, I'm trying to understand here. The DA here said that Smollett wasn't exonerated, but the case here, the files are going to be sealed, and there was no plea bargain. What the hell just happened?
He was exonerated.
Okay, so, but why would the DA who signed off on the deal actually say he wasn't exonerated? That's what people are confused.
Yeah, trying to save face. I mean, look, here's how this goes. The same DA's office, the county attorney's office, had the discretion they used today when they initially charged on this case. They had that discretion when they went to a grand jury, and no prosecutor goes to a grand jury because they do not want a grand jury to deliver indictments. There's a saying in the legal community, the grand jury belongs to the prosecutor. You go in there expecting to get what you put the evidence in, and you expect for them to come back with an indictment. So this same office gets the 16-count indictment, and now what we hear today is, oh, no, No, it doesn't mean he's innocent. No, it doesn't mean that he didn't do anything wrong. But we're going to completely dismiss all charges, and we're going to expunge his record, and we're going to seal the files, all to the tune of Keep Hope Alive, 16 hours at Rainbow Push, and $10,000. Come on, y'all. Everybody knows better. Their case fell apart. We may not know where it fell apart. We may not know whose fault it is. But I tell you what, the fact that they did not tip off Emanuel and they did not tip off the police tells me a lot about whose fault it probably was.
So, Chicago Police Union, they want the FBI to investigate Kim Foxx and Jussie Smollett. You have the area detective who oversaw the investigation. He tells the Chicago Sun-Times, we were absolutely prepared to go to trial. We were rock solid. We were excited to have this case prosecuted. And you're saying that clearly the evidence that they procured fell apart. You had Emanuel at the news conference saying only a sliver of the evidence was presented to the grand jury, not a lot, and that they had a lot more to present.
Right, but the prosecutor, I guess it's Regatz, I don't know how to correctly pronounce his name. It was his decision, first of all. It wasn't Kim Foxx's, and he was clear that she was recused and she had no part to do with the decision. So this whole blame the black woman thing that they're trying to get going now, that's going to fail. And he's a 23-year career prosecutor. And then it doesn't matter if the police department thinks that they're ready to go to trial. When the police department finishes their investigation and hands over the evidence, it's up to the prosecutor to decide if there's going to be a charge and what that charge is going to be. And they choose what evidence they take to the grand jury. And then their investigators continue to investigate. So it could have been anything. One of the witnesses could have fallen apart. They could have found out that something was going on wrong with the interrogation in the police office. It could have been any number of things, but here's what I'm telling you, it wasn't. It was not the case that they just decided to get rid of this because it was overreaching. It was overreaching from the beginning. They knew that. This was a mess, an unnecessary mess from the beginning. But they didn't have to charge in the first place. And today they could have come out and said, well, we've reduced it to 3 counts. We've reduced it to 2 counts. We've accepted a plea for 1 count plus probation. We're taking diversion if he's clean for a year. They could have done a whole bunch of stuff that they did not do. So that tells me that something went very wrong on the Chicago government side of things, not on the Smollett side. I'm
going to read another quote. This is the last one for you before I go to my panel here, because I know they can't wait to talk about this. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, again, first Assistant State's Attorney Joseph Maggots said the decision to drop the charges should not be interpreted that Smollett did not do what police and prosecutors have alleged, pay his assailants to fake the attack and then falsely report the incident to police. Quote, he said, also, nor did dropping the charges mean that Smollett was a victim of a crime, Maggots said emphatically. Quote, absolutely not. We stand behind the CPD investigation done in this case. We stand behind the approval of charges in this case, Maggots told the Sun-Times. They did a fantastic job. The fact there was an alternative disposition in this case is not and should not be viewed as some kind of admission there was something wrong with the case or something wrong with the investigation that the Chicago police did. Quote, it's a nonviolent crime. He has no felony criminal background. If you start looking at the disposition in the case, in every case you need to look at the facts and circumstances of the case and the defendant's background. Take it away.
It's almost laughable though, right? Because like, I mean, on 1 count, he could have gotten probation. To say that it has to do with him having no criminal background, and for that, they are wiping it out like the arrest never even happened. I mean, it is a complete expungement. So when I look at something like that, it is quite obvious to me. And the way that they said, oops, here you go, to the police department and to the mayor And that's why the prosecutor's office has discretion. That's why they are a separate branch, and they do what they're going to do. And you saw Emanuel said we have to work with them again, so he didn't want to poo-poo on them too much. But it is clear to me as day, there's nobody who's been in this business who would say that they would walk away from this much pressure, this much notoriety, and a 16-count indictment unless they did not believe that they could prove that case and win at trial. That's just the bottom line. And I don't know why that is, and we may never know because they fielded it. And I don't think they fielded it to help Jussie Smollett. They probably fielded it to help themselves.
All right, Monique Presley. We appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Let's introduce my panel.
Thank you.
Malik Abdul, Republican Communications Consultant. Darlene Somerville, White House Correspondent for the Associated Press. Dr. Jason Nichols, Lecturer, Department of African American Studies, University of Maryland, College Park. I have no idea what the hell. Malik, I'll start with you. Seriously, I heard everything Monique said.
So did I.
I heard everything. Everything that I've read.
I read the same things.
I still have no idea what the hell happened.
Yeah, this is the past 24 hours have been really something as far as indictments or non-indictments are concerned. We should start out, by saying, of course, that this is all speculation, because the documents are now, the case will now be sealed, so we'll never know for sure. So a lot of what we're doing is speculating, but it is amazing to hear, well, first of all, just to witness, we hear this, there's an emergency hearing. Yeah, okay, and then Jussie walks out and says, okay, well, I'm innocent. And then to have the mayor and the superintendent of the police department there come out as forceful as they did. Whether we think that the history of the CPD or think that Jussie is innocent or guilty, this has to be unprecedented, what we're seeing. This is not who was that? Baltimore, Marilyn Mosby.
Yeah, Mosby.
This is not one of those type of situations where there was some contention between the city and the state or that type of thing. You can add, maybe they overcharged in it like they did in that Mosby case, in the case that Mosby had. But this is unprecedented.
Darlene,
this is amazing.
Again, as reporters, look, you look at these things. The Sun-Times story, according to defense attorneys, saying they have never in their life heard anything like this. And then for the state's attorney to say that Smollett agreed to community service, but there's no plea bargain. So literally, he doesn't actually have to do it. I'm just sort of sitting here going, I've never heard of a case where the DA says nothing wrong with the investigation, nothing wrong with any of that. We had evidence, but we disposed of it. And normally when you dispose of a case like this here, I remember when Michael Irvin pled nolo contendere to drug charges. It wasn't a guilty plea, but in this case, it's gone. No record, expunged, document sealed. I don't know what the hell happened today.
It was head-snapping, to say the least. And I still remember back when the prosecutors charged him. Remember, the prosecutor stood there and she read from this
read the proffer.
laundry list and times, and he did this, and then this happened, and then that happened. It seemed like they were certain they had a slam dunk of a case against Jussie Smollett. And then now to just come out and say, oh, well, we're dropping the charges. It seems there's a little bit more explaining that someone should do just for the public interest.
Jason?
Yeah, so first of all, I see kind of a weird connection between this and the Mueller report in a weird way. We're not saying he's guilty, but it's kind of this kind of waffling back and forth. But like you, Roland, I was disgusted by what I saw from not only the superintendent. First of all, in Chicago, they solved 5% of their non-fatal shootings in Chicago. And you look at the fact that they solved 17% of their murders. And yet, Rahm Emanuel, and as you alluded to with Laquan McDonald and some other cases, and the fact that they have a history of torture in the Chicago Police Department, but Rahm Emanuel says that this has embarrassed our city. It's not the fact that you can't solve 95% of your your shootings. This is it's all Jussie Smollett. It's not the fact, that you have all of these issues in the city, the fact that you have kids, schools shutting down, you have kids walking across dangerous gang territory to go to school. They're scared to go to school every day. That it's all Jussie Smollett, that's the problem? I found that to be just unconscionable, disgusting from Rahm Emanuel, but I shouldn't be surprised.
Can y'all explain to me why conservatives are so mad? I mean, conservative, Malik, seriously. Y'all losing, your friends, Malik, are losing their damn mind. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how did this, I ain't seen this many white folks mad since OJ.
Well, let's not just say white folks. This is what I talk about all the time.
No, but conservatives are like up in arms. They're like, oh, this is leftist privilege.
Yeah, sure.
This is,
and some even say black privilege.
Obama orchestrated this whole thing.
Yeah, with Michelle Obama and the whole thing. This is part of this is more of the tit for tat. I talk about the tit for tat.
Well, what's the tit?
So
if it's the tat,
this. If you think about what Jason actually mentioned about the Mueller report, where we are now is where yesterday you had Democrats saying, but. He said something. He didn't exactly clear him of the obstruction of justice.
Stop.
This is the same thing. Come on, Roland.
I'm gonna stop you right here.
Roland.
Robert Mueller was investigating a foreign entity interfering in the presidential election.
Right.
This is Jussie Smollett going to Subway at 2 o'clock in the morning. Said he got Mueller got some 30 people indicted, convicted, folks going to jail. It ain't no comparison between a Mueller investigation of the President of the United States and a dude on Empire.
But we're not talking about the investigation itself. We're talking about the response to the investigation.
But the response is stupid.
Well, I agree.
It ain't even a comparison.
No, but I think that the response that on yesterday where Democrats were saying, well, there must be something else, and they were decrying Mueller. Actually, they were even criticizing the Department of Justice in the summer report. I think this is just another example of that. I don't do the fake outrage. Now, I think that this is a problem. I still question where are the white racist, homophobic, MAGA-loving Trump supporters. I still question where they are, but I think that whatever the feelings that conservatives have, the feelings that conservatives have about this are the same feelings that Democrats have about other
Darlene,
issues.
I don't really see how it makes no sense to me, but literally conservatives are like going crazy on social media saying, oh, I'm telling you, I ain't seen white folks this mad since OJ. Like, how this black man got off?
It's the black ones, too. It ain't just the white conservatives. It's the black ones, too.
Darlene, your thoughts?
Well, like I said before, everyone thought when the Chicago police came out and seemed to have this slam dunk case against Jussie, they figured, okay, he's going to jail. And now to see them just drop the charges, basically with no explanation. I mean, you're up in arms, right?
No, I'm laughing. I'm just trying to figure out literally what the hell happened. Because I can't actually put two and two together, because if on one hand you tell me we had no issues with the investigation and it was solid,
then why drop the charges?
Why the disposition? And if you want to make the argument that this was a non-violent crime, it makes no sense expending judicial resources. Okay, but there was no plea bargain.
Right.
So it's sort of like, so then it's like, well, we're not exonerating him. You are. I mean, just common sense. If you expunge the record, if you seal it, and there's no other than keep your $10,000, that's it?
That means there's more to the story.
Yes. That's what it is. So I'm just trying to, again, though, I'm just sort of laughing at this whole deal, trying to figure out how 2 and 2 equals 9.
That's what it is.
Because that's pretty much what this, this must be new math. This is new law, but
it's old Chicago.
It's Chicago. But for Jussie, hey, he get to go back to the set. I'm good. I don't face any illegal action. And again, so for all y'all white folks out there still mad, Jussie free, OJ free. y'all got Trump. All right, so there you go. We equal. All right, y'all. We'll keep trying to figure out what the hell is going on. All right, y'all. New developments in the case of Lieutenant Richard W. Collins, Jr., who was fatally stabbed to death while waiting for a bus on the University of Maryland campus 2 years ago. According to police, a white man approached Collins and said, quote, step left if you know what's best for you. When he didn't move, Sean Urbanski stabbed him to death. Turns out Urbanski was involved with a racist Facebook group. Urbanski was charged with first-degree murder, and the FBI was asked to investigate the killing as a hate crime. The FBI has reportedly found no basis for a federal hate crime prosecution. Joining us now is Dr. Rashawn Ray from the University of Maryland, a board member board member there, and the Second Lieutenant Richard Collins, board member of the Second Lieutenant Richard W. Collins III Foundation. This sort of goes back to what Eric Holder said when he's Attorney General, that the bar is so high to reach federal civil rights violations, or in the case of hate crime. What more do you need than a white supremacist who targets a black man, a veteran, kills him, guy belonged to a racist hate group? What more do they need?
I mean, I'm unsure what else is needed in this particular case, but what it speaks to is broader trends as you lay out, as Eric Holder has done, as it relates to broader trends about who's killed in America and who's valued. So when we think about executions in the United States, what we actually see is that 76% of individuals who are executed allegedly murdered a white person. What's interesting is that only 50% of the murder victims are white. So we have a huge disparity there. The other part of this relates to black victims. Only about 20 times in the United States has a black victim had a white murderer, and then that white murderer actually been given the death penalty. When it comes to hate crimes, I think part of what happens in the United States is, as you mentioned, the bar is so high. And part of the reason why the bar is so high is because racism is a pillar that holds up the United States. And as that particular pillar, things that oftentimes should be deemed as racist or racism is actually deemed as normative behavior. So when we see in the example of Sean Urbanski, and I mean, Lieutenant Richard Collins, I mean, God rest his soul, he was getting ready to graduate from Bowie State University. He was waiting for a vehicle to come pick him up with some of his friends. He was doing everything that he had been taught by his parents, who are wonderful people, who had raised him and his sister in a household that I think is oftentimes a beacon of hope for a lot of people. They did everything right. He was getting ready to go serve his country, and yet and still, before he could actually go overseas to help protect the United States, he was taken out by white supremacists at the University of Maryland in a space that was supposed to be safe for him.
What is the status of the Urbanski case?
The status of the case currently is that it is ongoing. It hasn't went to trial yet, but there was a recent development in the sense that they're not going to seek the death penalty in the case. I think what becomes clear to people in the state of Maryland, in Prince George's County in particular, in Bowie and College Park, as well as around the country.
He tells him, step to the left, If you don't know something's going to happen, and he kills him. And not seek the death penalty?
So what's interesting about this particular case, when they dug into Urbanski's history, what they found was that he was part of online white supremacist groups. So not only was it about telling him to step to the left, that it was a deliberate act, but it's also the fact that he had white supremacist ties. And so the fact that a hate crime would not be something that would be pursued, to me, is unfathomable, given what we know about this particular case and given what we know about hate crimes more broadly in the United States.
Does it make any sense?
No, it doesn't. He and I are colleagues, Dr. Ray and I, and everybody was shaken and hurt by this murder. It was, he was a Bowie State student, but still a part of the university system of Maryland. And it really hurt all of us. It hurt I even spoke to police officers, and they were traumatized by what had occurred. This whole case, the fact that they are not seeking the death penalty, I have my own feelings about the death penalty, but what I will say is the fact that they're not viewing this as a hate crime when the police have recommended that it be viewed as a hate crime, it's really disappointing about our system. But again, these are the way things seem to happen in our society and in our system, and how we value, even like as Rashawn said, the people who do things every way right. So first we see a lot of young black people, people say their lives don't matter because of some choices they may have made when they were younger. And so you blame them, you say that they're thugs, but you have someone who actually did everything the way that the system says it's supposed to be done, someone who is serving his country, and you take him out and you don't value him enough to give him full justice. I think it's despicable, and we hope that he gets Sean Urbanski faces the full brunt of the law.
Darlene, this is one of those cases again that is quite perplexing to black folks. White supremacist kills black man, not only not facing federal hate crime charges, but not even seeking the death penalty. And when people talk about two different justice systems, this rings loud and clear.
It does. One question I would have, though, is I'm not too familiar with the case, but did Maryland say why they're not pursuing the death penalty or hate crimes?
You know, part of what's
been
been
reason or justification.
You know, part of what's been interesting about this case is the lack of information to the public, even the lack of information to people who are close. And I find that extremely troubling in a county that is majority African American, that is the most affluent African American county in the United States. And yet and still, this is something where people have to pry and ask, what is the status of this particular case? That happened at the flagship university where Dr. Nichols and I happen to work. People shouldn't have to wonder what's happening. Things should be very transparent. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. And I think that's what's highly problematic as well.
And this should have been nationwide news as well. You know, the fact that it was so localized, at least it seemed like to me, I was expecting perhaps even the president to weigh in, but, you know, we know who we have as president. But, you know, I would think that this would be nationwide news. The fact that someone who is a college student about to be a college graduate, someone who is serving his country, gets murdered in cold blood on a college campus, you would think that this would be huge. This would be something that people are discussing. And, but only on the Roland Martin show and a few other places.
No, it's no shock to me.
Yeah, but I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning about the high bar to actually prove a hate crime. And it seems like that's where we are. You know, this is a different situation, even if you believe that Jussie Smollett, that there were people, you know, you had epithets involved in that. So there was something that people could connect to it, even though with the history of this guy, you know, his white supremacist history or whatever, whether or not that factored into the commission of the crime. And I don't know if they proved that. And so that may be why we're not seeing at least the hate crime portion of that, because it's such a high bar. I would imagine that that's.
I mean, what's interesting to me, like I always kind of think, what else do we have to have? So you have the person, Sean Urbanski, admitting to the murder. They have the evidence. They have direct links with him being part of white supremacist groups. I mean, I think part of what it speaks to is that unfortunately, white supremacy and racism are normalized in our society. So that bar we talk about, we can be very deliberate about what we mean by that bar. And I think part of highlighting it is the fact that Lieutenant Richard Collins, Second Lieutenant Richard Collins, hasn't really even been acknowledged formally by the military, whether that be at universities outside of Bowie State or even nationally in regards to giving him his proper credit. And I think that's something that really needs to happen.
Right? Yep.
Yeah, he was a veteran. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Rashawn Ray, we certainly appreciate it. We're certainly glad to be able to highlight this story and elevate it. And we'll keep watching it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks. I don't think there's much controversy, at least on this show, that Donald Trump's rhetoric inspires white supremacists and white domestic terrorists. Two professors and a graduate student from the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas, did a study to see if there was a correlation between Trump's racist, homophobic, anti-Muslim language and hate crimes. They looked at all the counties where Donald Trump held rallies in 2016. Then they looked at hate crimes in those counties and compared them to similar counties that did not host a Trump rally. Their findings were published in the Washington Post. This is what they discovered. They found that counties that had hosted a 2016 Trump campaign rally saw a 226% increase in reported hate crimes over comparable counties that did not host such a rally. Now, again, when we talk about these rallies, these hate crimes rallies, these not hate crime rallies, these rallies of Donald Trump and largely white people, you don't see many black people at these rallies. You see him hyping folks up. You see them upset, mad as all get out, of course, with the media there as well. Let's go to our panel here. Darlene, I want to start with you. What do you make of this really interesting research where they simply looked at the numbers?
Well, it is interesting, but there's already this perception that the president's rhetoric, things he says, has said, or continues to say about immigrants, for example, Mexicans, Muslims, that the rhetoric that he uses does give people who oppose immigrants and people of different religions some sort of comfort to kind of go out and act on their views. So it is interesting to actually see that someone has crunched the numbers.
Malik?
Yeah, I don't think anything about this particular study.
Well, I'm sorry. Did you miss what I read?
Yeah,
I mean, they literally looked at the places where Donald Trump held rallies.
Sure.
And then said, okay, let's talk about a hate crime, a 226% increase.
Sure.
That says a hell of a lot, the places where he holds rallies and people who are also supporters of him.
Yeah, but we know how studies work. So if someone wanted to have a study, and at the end of that study find out that crime is bad in cities where Democrats are in charge, crime is bad in black communities where Democrats are in charge, or largely black communities or something like that, it's easy to actually prove that. So I think this is similar.
What the hell are you talking about?
Meaning that if someone wanted to do a study to prove that crime is bad in inner cities as opposed to rural cities, there's actually facts to actually prove that.
Well, how about these facts?
Yeah,
where Donald Trump held rallies in 2016, there's a 226% increase in hate crimes.
The article argued correlation, not causation. So that's what the article actually argued.
Okay,
I don't think much of the
can
study.
You go ahead?
I don't think much of the study at all. I mean, what does that mean?
Doc, go ahead. I don't know what he's talking about.
To me, I think it's very clear what the study is saying. It's saying that, and something that we all can see visibly, that the president, with his rhetoric, with things that go on at his rallies, them attacking cameramen and people who are pretty neutral in this situation, that people get fired up and they're willing to go out and commit violent acts. This is one of the reasons why people believe Jussie Smollett's story in the beginning was because of the fact that there's so much violence
because of Donald Trump
at Trump rallies.
You think that they believe that because of Donald Trump?
But what it speaks to, here's what it speaks to. What it speaks to is that what Donald Trump has to say to that constituency correlates in terms of how they actually behave, even not at a rally. That's what it speaks to. What it speaks to is that the people who he's appealing to are the people who are actually more susceptible to actually do this type of thing. Is it shocking that Donald Trump is speaking to people who are largely anti-Muslim? I'm not done. That he's largely speaking to people who are anti-immigrant, folks who are largely anti-black? Who are largely anti-gay? I mean, that is his base. Yes or no?
No, I don't think that's his base at all. I'm his base.
That's not his base.
I'm his base.
No, you're not.
You're his base.
No, you're not.
I disagree with that.
How am I not his base?
Walk your black. Hold up. Let me be real clear. Walk your black ass into a rally with what's on your head and see how you get response. No,
I've done it. I've walked into Trump Hotel with it. I've attended.
Trump Hotel is different.
We ain't talking about Trump Hotel.
I'm on TV with it.
Hold up.
Retweeted with this same goofy on my head.
What Trump rallies?
There's a reason for that.
I've never felt any fear, whether it was the Moore rally that I attended last year.
The what rally?
The Moore rally, the mother of all rallies.
What was that?
That was last fall, I think.
Where was that?
It was in D.C.
Oh, hell no. No, Malik, no. I gotta stop you right there. Malik, I gotta stop you right there. Malik, I gotta stop you right there.
Just tell you.
No, Malik, hold on one second. No, wait. I got you. Malik, we ain't talking about a rally in D.C.
Anywhere.
No, Malik, you know doggone well, if you roll up into a rally in Indiana or Mississippi
or Charlottesville,
a Trump rally with that on your head and you being black, they ain't gonna say, "What up, my Republican brother?" They gonna say, "What the hell he doing here?"
I disagree with you.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I disagree with you as someone who's attended these type of
Darlene,
events.
have you covered any of the Trump rallies?
Yes, I've covered rallies since he's been president, and he's had quite a few of them.
And had you covered any during the campaign?
Not during the campaign.
Give the folks a sense of what that room feels like and the folks who are there. Because when you look at the other media people, when he goes in on media, have you been in that pen?
Well, yeah. The press is usually corralled off in a pen in an area. And then at a certain point in his rallies, they go for about an hour, and he comes to the part where he talks about fake news, and then he'll point to the media, and then often what happens is the entire arena or wherever you are will turn and look at all of us, and they'll start chanting, CNN sucks or fake news or something like that.
Any cussing, any...
If there is, you can't really hear it over just the general commotion of the rally and what's going on, but there have been some uncomfortable moments.
Would you call it a cordial environment?
Certainly not toward the press, but for a few minutes, not for the entire hour that he's up there doing his thing, because he moves through so many different topics in that 1 hour.
Right, you have no attention span. But also, we have seen other rallies. First of all, during the campaign, where there were black Trump supporters who talked about, Doc, how they got treated at a rally, because people were like, oh, you're not one of us. They were like, yo, chill out, I am. Right. They essentially, unless they were walking in wearing a MAGA hat and wearing a bunch of MAGA bumper stickers, it was kind of like you had to prove yourself.
Right, absolutely. And again, from my home state, going back to some of the things that we talked about before, one of the known white supremacists, Matthew Heimbach, he was seen pushing a black woman at those rallies. We've seen all kinds of violence, but yet...
saw a brother get punched.
Yeah, we saw a brother just get punched for just walking up and getting ready to walk out in front of the police, get punched in his face by someone. So this idea that, these people are just, maybe they're law-abiding in other aspects of their life, but when they get in that building, something turns on, and I think that can translate out for a small number where you see violence.
For me, I don't think it's something that happens in that building. I think there's an evil spirit already existing in that place, and he just
in those people,
and he just in that place,
in those people,
and he chooses to simply go there, and it's a reflection of those people and that place. Got to go to a break. We come back. We're going to talk about racial gerrymandering. Supreme Court is hearing a critically important case. If they decide for Republicans in North Carolina, you could fully expect to see gerrymandering go crazy like what we saw with voter suppression after Shelby v. Holder. This is Roland Martin Unfiltered. Back in a moment. Hey, fam. Want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
You're either going to help run it or they're going to run it for you. In order to get anything done in this world, we have to work with the system that's there. And you have to have the courage of your convictions. You may despise me, you may not understand my choice, but at least you can respect that I stood in it. If you are outside the mainstream, no one can push you aside any further. Life makes you jaded, and it hurts you, and it's painful. And we've had a lot of pain in this country. Trump can show up and say anything, and they can just go, oh, yeah.
And the African-American community was great to us. They didn't vote.
He just called you stupid. Did you hear that? But he's for us. Really? And they were just regurgitating the things that they had heard on a radio or in the barbershop or something somebody had told them. They hadn't thought about it. Democracy is in danger because people don't know how to think. I'm done with trying to convince people to try to vote for their, for their life. You have to run for your life. I'm gonna go try to get people who are open to it and lead them. I'm done with hope. Fuck hope. Bye. That's good news.
All right, folks, there's such a thing as too much police. Well, the residents of East Baltimore who oppose the conversion of Johns Hopkins University's private security force into a full-fledged police department say yes. Joining us right now, one of the folks opposed to that is Davon Love, Director of Public Policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle in Baltimore. Davon, glad to have you here on the show. So they want to convert the private security force into a police department?
I mean, what's insane about it is Johns Hopkins University is a private university. And so they already do have armed security guards. And so one of the things that the community has remarked about is the kind of tension that exists between those armed security, particularly the black students. Like, black students have been profiled and have had issues. And so what's really, remarkable is the fact that Johns Hopkins, a private university, now wants a private police force. And what's really curious about it is that Baltimore City Police Department is currently under a consent decree. They just recently had, a tremendous scandal with the Gun Trace Task Force, where they had police officers that were robbing people, selling drugs, beating people up. And so this would be the police department under which this Johns Hopkins private police force would be monitored by. Right. And so, the community obviously has issues with that. Why not fix the current Baltimore City Police Department and get that right before you consider developing a private police force? And the way that many folks in the community and activists see it, this is really an issue because, Baltimore's experienced an issue with high homicides. And so I imagine that a lot of the white student base that would normally come to a university like Johns Hopkins are scared. And so a private police force will provide the kind of selling point to that base that would attract those kinds of students at the expense of the people that live in the community that would genuinely feel scared to have Johns Hopkins have its own police force.
Before my panelists ask you some questions, I'm going to ask you one more question. That is, so what's the difference between a private security force and a private police department?
Well, so there are two very important distinctions. One is that this private police force would actually have the ability to detain people. And that's part of the issue.
So right now, the security guards can't.
Right, they can't. Right, they can't place you under arrest. And so typically, the way that it has worked in the past, as I've been told by former security and police officers, is that typically the things that they handle are like protecting people, making sure people are okay, and that if they come across the situation, they have a working relationship enough with the police department when they need the police, they call the police.
Like what happened at a department store.
Exactly, exactly,
okay.
Right. And so the other thing that would be different that's really important is that they would have the liability that police officers have in terms of their ability to use deadly force. And so if you think about an armed security guard, they have to be much more careful about how they use force because they don't have the protections of the state. In this instance, the private police force essentially wants that cover so that if they have to use deadly force, they have the state protections that police have.
Panelists, questions?
No, I don't know how I feel about it. I've actually read about it, so I've heard some of the stuff that you said. Really, both arguments. Even now, listening to you, I still don't know where I fall on it. The idea that that they would be given that sort of authority that policemen have. I would be concerned about training, and I don't want to diminish private security that they're not trained or anything. But I have some issues with it, but I'm still woody about it.
Go ahead.
So my question is, we know that Baltimore City has high homicides. Have there been any crimes or homicides in particular, but any serious crimes that have been happening, or has there been a rise that has led to everyone or people talking about a private police force?
Well, what's interesting is, Baltimore has had, this issue of high homicides really since 2015, right? There's been a spike since really the uprising. And so there have been a variety of different perspectives on how to address it. One of the things that's actually happened is that our state legislature and our mayor and city council actually have, and in both cases, looked to mandatory minimums, right?
But has it hit Johns Hopkins University? That's like, have there been some serious crimes on the campus?
Not anything that's any different than what the rest of the city experiences.
Because I believe University of Maryland College Park is probably the least safe, university. You guys aren't in the university system, but still probably far less safe than students at Johns Hopkins. So it's just baffling to me that people want a private police force when there hasn't been an event that has caused us
that leads to it, right?
That leads to it.
A part of the problem with the way that people talk about dealing with homicides and violence is that the fear oftentimes takes the rationality out of the room. And so what happens is that, and one of the things that's important to know about Johns Hopkins, the community in East Baltimore does not trust Johns Hopkins. They've gentrified, that area. Yeah. Lots of people have been displaced from their homes. If you look at Henrietta Lacks and the way that they've made billions of dollars off of the immortal cells of Henrietta Lacks and have not paid anything to the descendants and really to the community at large in any meaningful way, I think a big part of it is if you're going to have a private police force, you're going to give it to a university that has such a tenuous relationship to that institution.
All right. Darlene, go ahead. Final comment.
Would the private police force have jurisdiction just on campus, or would they be able to do things in the community, arrest somebody or whatever, off,
So that's actually one of the scariest things about the bill. So the bill is actually going to be on the Maryland House of Delegates floor tomorrow. And what the bill does is that it does say that the police force would operate within areas adjacent to the campus, but it gives exceptions where the police department, Baltimore City Police Department, can authorize Hopkins police to exercise policing authorities outside of that jurisdiction without any significant check, and the boundaries would be determined by an MOU that would happen between the city and the university and the police department.
And don't forget, you had the DeBose shooting in Cincinnati, where was a university police officer who shot and killed him, and that was one of the issues there. Davon Love, we appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to a break right now. We come back, we're going to talk about Affordable Care Act and gerrymandering before the Supreme Court right here, Roland Martin Unfiltered.
I want to see how life can triumph. Artist Romare Bearden.
All right, folks, HBCU Giving Day. Our university is Rusk College, founded in 1866, located in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Trust me, Malik will not be going Trump on that campus. Notable graduates include Ida B. Wells, Ruby Elsie, Anita Ward, Leslie B. McLemore, Clinton LaSure, and many others. Support Rusk College. Go to ruskcollege.edu, ruskcollege.edu. Calling all HBCU alumni, students, and leaders, enter the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement their proposal. The deadline to apply is March 31st, 2019. Go to this website right here, fgb.life, for more information and to apply. Ford goes further in our community, and we certainly appreciate them being a partner here at Roland Martin Unfiltered. All right, folks, California Senator and presidential candidate Kamala Harris is out today with a new proposal to raise teacher salaries by an average of $13,500 or 23%, but also in her proposal is an actual black agenda, extra money and support for teachers in schools, which disproportionately serve students of color, and extra support for teacher training at HBCUs. Now, let's see, of course, if the other candidates are going to join her in this. She's getting lots of support from folks about the additional money for teachers. The question whether or not, of course, will she, of course, be the Democratic nominee? And will that be sort of setting the pace for the other candidates? We shall see. We also will see whether education becomes a real topic in this presidential campaign. Unfortunately, too often it is not. That's also because the people who are typically asking questions, folks in the media, their kids go to private school. That's why they don't ask about public education, just so y'all know. All right, folks, let's talk Affordable Care Act. Republicans cannot stand Obamacare. Also, that's what the Affordable Care Act is. They've tried their best to repeal and replace. Now a bunch of red state attorneys generals have sued to have it declared unconstitutional. A judge in Texas agreed, and the case is headed for the appeals court and most likely another round at the Supreme Court. And yesterday, of course, Donald Trump's Department of Justice said they agree with the judge and want all the law thrown out, saying they will not defend the Affordable Care Act. Now, of course, this calls for no coverage for pre-existing conditions, no kids and their families' health insurance until 26, no subsidies for coverage, and no Medicaid expansion. Millions of people would lose coverage. New York Times columnist and Pulitzer Prize-winning Paul Krugman tweeted out this chart to show what would happen in just one state that voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. New coal jobs, a few thousand. How many who would lose health insurance? 140,000. Darlene, I'm going to start with you. Utah. The voters there voted to expand Medicaid expansion. Republicans said, y'all know what y'all doing, so we're going to ignore that. Look, you cover the White House, and I got a security guard downstairs, a brother who's an African immigrant, and loves Donald Trump. And he keeps telling me that Trump has a health plan. I keep telling him, I ain't seen this plan you keep talking about that will replace the Affordable Care Act. Are you aware of an actual health care plan that Donald Trump has presented?
Not yet. There is legislation in Congress. I believe it's sponsored by Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, and I think Senator Graham, Lindsey Graham. That seems to be one idea that the White House is looking at. But what you have here is the same situation that you had all those years ago when Republicans kept saying they wanted to repeal and replace. The plan is repeal and replace, but they have not yet come up with what they want to replace it.
So they got a repeal and plan. They got a repeal and replace plan, but ain't got a plan if they repeal and replace.
Right.
Yes.
There were some Republicans who were at the White House today to talk to the president about trade. They came out and talked to reporters. Some of the questions they got had to do with health care. Steve Scalise, who is from Louisiana and who's the second-ranking Republican in the House, talked about Republicans want to protect people with pre-existing conditions. They want people to have lower premiums. They want a plan that will lower premiums. So they seem to kind of know what they want, but they haven't stitched it all together yet in a plan that will help them get there.
So Malik, we should get rid of the existing plan in favor of a plan that don't nobody even know what it is. But just trust. Is y'all plan called Just Trust Us?
Look, so the Republicans definitely have to get this together. I agree.
You think?
I agree with Donald Trump, believe it or not. I agree with Donald Trump, who said earlier today that this will be the GOP's health plan.
What?
He said the Republican Party will be the party of health care.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
That's what he said.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He ain't present no damn plan.
No, I'm not saying that he presented a plan, but the fact that he acknowledged that, now you can say, okay, well, he was just saying that to kind of buff his chest out a little bit, but the idea is that this will be whatever they come up with. Whatever they come up with and whenever they come up with it, this will no longer, we can no longer argue Obamacare.
Why?
We won't be able to argue Obamacare.
I'm trying to
this will
understand.
be Trump care. This will be GOP care. This will be the Republican care. Whatever you want to call it, Republicans will own this health care issue.
Do y'all know Democrats control the House, right?
Yes.
So how y'all gonna get that passed?
I don't know, but my point is that the Republicans now will own this.
Doc.
Well, they actually did have a plan, and there was a Trump care plan, and that was the AHCA. They were trying to replace it. It was an enormous failure. Didn't work even under a Republican-controlled Congress. So, but Donald Trump tried to stay hands off because he didn't want any accountability, just like he doesn't want accountability.
And he still don't. Again, can I just see a one-sheeter?
Right, exactly. They don't put out any.
I haven't seen one. That's all I'm saying. But here's
Totally
the piece.
agree.
One of the reasons why you even have this particular lawsuit is because of. It all goes back to 2010, when Republicans flipped a number of state houses and legislatures and governor's mansions as a result. And then, of course, what happened after that, we saw 2 years later when Shelby B. Holder came before the Supreme Court that gutted a key component of the Voting Rights Act. And then we saw massive voter suppression. Well, that also was a result of political gerrymandering. Today, before the Supreme Court, the North Carolina districts went before. Now, here's the deal, y'all. North Carolina is a state evenly split between Republicans and Democrats. In fact, actually, there really are more registered Democrats in North Carolina than Republicans. But Republicans control 10 of 13 seats. That is nuts. Now, the Supreme Court heard that, and the map was drawn by the Republican legislature that a lower court said specifically targeted African Americans, Malik, with almost surgical precision. This case could decide whether partisan maps by Republicans and Democrats all over the country could be immune from challenges of selective voter disenfranchisement. Now, during oral arguments, the justices seem to be split on ideological lines. Liberal justices asking whether drawing districts to help one party violates the one man, one vote standard. Conservative justices seem to incline to keep the court out of the fight altogether. Of course, there are 5 conservative justices, and on this deal, Darlene, I want to start with you. Anthony Kennedy was that critical vote where he said there could be a point where this thing had reached political gerrymandering and it was bad. The Supreme Court has been trying to stay out of this by saying we don't want to get involved with partisan battles, but it has reached the point now where you had in Pennsylvania where they threw out those districts. They threw them out. North Carolina Republicans filed suit. In fact, Republicans in Pennsylvania were so treacherous, they tried to impeach the state Supreme Court justices who actually ruled on it. That's how vile they were. In Michigan, the voters said we need to have an independent commission that draws lines to take this thing out of Republican and Democrats' hand, because the gerrymandering has got so bad. You look at Wisconsin, that case went before the Supreme Court. They kicked it back as well. Just your assessment of this issue and really how contentious it is, and how people really they hear gerrymandering but not realize this does have a direct impact on who represents you.
It does, because it affects, the population count. The census is coming up. All of that determines federal money for different programs that goes to states. A lot of spending is based on congressional districts and so on and so forth. But you mentioned the point that last year the Supreme Court punted on some of these cases, and there's no guarantee that after hearing these arguments today that they will actually rule one way or the other. They could find a way out of it again.
I think it's important to point out, I think one of the other cases that they're considering here is the Maryland gerrymandering case, where you're familiar?
No, yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to bring that up. That's why I knew it was coming.
No, hold up. For the purpose of the audience, how extensive is gerrymandering in Maryland?
Well, I think it was, one district, I think it was?
Maryland's solidly blue.
I think that particular case.
It was one district.
I think I think it was one district.
How many was in Pennsylvania?
Whether
the whole state?
Whether it was one.
How many? Hold up.
No. We should be concerned about this, right?
No, first of all, again, for the purpose of facts.
Okay.
10 out of 13 in North Carolina. So really the entire the entire North Carolina congressional delegation is impacted by gerrymandering.
Right, but the SCOTUSs are still ruling on the gerrymandering case too in Maryland.
No, I'm aware of that. Okay. No, but what I'm trying to show you is that if you actually step back, because North Carolina also has some issues, New Jersey does. If you look at which party... stop. No, hold on. You can shake your head. I'm trying to establish a set of facts, not offering an opinion. The facts don't lie. In terms of who has utilized racial gerrymandering and political gerrymandering to their benefit, I can show you Republicans in Pennsylvania, Republicans in North Carolina, Republicans in Wisconsin. I can go Republicans in Michigan. I can go down the line. So what I'm saying is, one of the reasons why Mitch McConnell did not want Merrick Garland on this court, because they understood that these cases were coming before and they needed that fifth vote to ensure these things stay the same. Well, go ahead with your one district.
But Maryland is still one of the cases that the Supreme Court is.
No, I got you.
So
just showing impact.
But even though, and I don't think it's Wisconsin that they're considering.
I say the previous. I just said, you didn't hear me right. I said the Supreme Court previously looked at Wisconsin, kicked the case back to the lower court. This case came forward because Republicans in North Carolina are now scared to death because they've lost the supermajority. There's now a Democratic governor, and they now are desperate because they can now lose. This is one of the final pieces of Republican leverage in North Carolina. Now they lost the supermajority, and because they also tried to strip the state Supreme Court of all of their power, because now it's now dominated by Democrats. But go ahead with your final comment.
I am a quick study, so I am not going to argue with you about the number of states.
That is very wise.
The involvement.
You are a very wise man.
But what I will say, we do need to acknowledge that of the Maryland gerrymandering.
Yes,
case.
absolutely.
So that's something that we do need to acknowledge. I'm not going to win which party does more.
Because you can't win.
No, you won't win.
Because you know I'm not lying.
So I'm not going to do that.
Doc, final comment? Anything you want to say? Any topic, whatever, what you got?
Yeah, well, I guess as far as gerrymandering and racial gerrymandering, we know that it's one-sided. So I don't think that there's much more I can say other than the fact that this is going to be, help our democracy, help the fact that, more people are enfranchised, whereas Republicans have historically, at least in the last 30 years and 40 years, been the party that has tried to take people's votes away through voter ID, through gerrymandering, through many other ways.
Darlene?
I just await the ruling from the Supreme Court in June.
No. You can do a comment on anything you want. Any topic, just whatever. Sort of like final comment on anything.
Well, that's my comment.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead and finish it. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'll await the Supreme Court ruling in June or whenever they decide.
Malik?
I agree with Darlene. How about that?
Gotcha. Final comment from me. I find it quite interesting that all of these speakers have went to APEC, and all of their conversations are all about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, one freshman Muslim member of Congress who got so much attention at APEC. Sounds to me like hit dog hollers, don't you think? Now, how much conversation have you heard coming out of APEC about the massive shooting that left nearly a dozen folks dead in Pittsburgh? Little. How about the rising anti-Semitism all across the country? Little. How about the increase when you talk about hate crime attacks all across the country? Little. But if so much attention has been focused on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, maybe it's because she might have had a point. See, when you spend that much time and energy trying to tear down one person, sounds to me like you are scared of who she is and what she has to say. Maybe that's why she's become the piñata at APEC. So maybe they might want to look at what she had to say, because it sounds to me like y'all are really concerned that she might gain traction in calling attention to how much influence you have on the U.S. Congress. I'm just saying. All right, folks, you want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar you give goes to support this show. Also, those of you who have given on YouTube, we appreciate that. You can give there as well. To Tavia Cleveland, thanks a bunch. And I got to give a shout out to Mr. Murray. I saw your post as well. Thank you so very much. Folks, tomorrow I'll be broadcasting actually, I'm off tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm in New York for the T. Howard Foundation Diversity Dinner in New York. I will, of course, have an interview, though, with Lee Saunders, of course, the president of AFS-CME, about some interesting numbers about the impact of the Janus decision on union workers. You don't want to miss our conversation. Thursday, I'll be broadcasting live from LA as part of our coverage for the NAACP Image Awards. All right, folks, y'all have an absolutely great night. Be sure to share, retweet, join our, join us on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope. Turn on your live notifications so every time we go live, you get to see us as well. All right, I got to go. Holla!